Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Ziglar Studios. I'm Tom Ziglar, CEO of Ziglar. I'm so excited that you're here. Every time we do an event like this, we have people from all over the world attend. It's such a blessing and an honor for you to come and invest your time to learn more about how you can impact others and help change their lives. Today we have Jason Frenn with us. Jason's one of our top speakers. He travels all over the world speaking in countries in a bilingual format in English, and he really has an incredible message for those of you who want to be more effective from the stage. If your desire is to influence people and impact people as a keynote speaker, as somebody who's up in front of groups, if you want to learn the key points, the ideas, the system, if you will, the way to have an impact so that lives are changed, so that people will take action on the message that you're delivering, then you're in the right place. Jason Frenn is going to lead us through this session. We're calling this the Ziglar Speaker Institute because in a few months we're going to be having our first ever course right here in Dallas, specifically designed for those of you who want to take your keynote speaking to the next level. I know you're going to enjoy the next minutes with Jason. He's going to give you inspiration and ideas that you can implement immediately in your very next presentation. So Jason, welcome.
Thank you.
It's so glad you're here. You
Great to be here.
You flew in from California yesterday, didn't you?
That's right, I did. I landed last night at 7 o'clock, so I'm glad to be here. It's always a joy.
And you're traveling all over the world. Where have you been this year?
This year I was in Singapore, I was in Hong Kong, in Argentina, El Salvador, Cuba. I've been all over the globe. Be going to Europe next year, so it's been a real fun-packed year. So many miles, so many air miles. My backside sent me an email and said, "I resign. I'm not doing this anymore." But I think we'll make it.
I know how you feel. I just got back from Australia and Papua New Guinea last week on a speaking tour. My body arrived in Dallas on Wednesday, and my brain actually didn't get here until Sunday. So, man, you know, it's tough when you're on the road and speaking and all that, but there's nothing more valuable, nothing more beneficial to you and the people in the room than being able to take a life-changing message where it's well received.
That's true.
I'm going to turn over this to you, and and I'll be back at the end as we go to that. So,
okay, thank you so much.
Brother.
Well, I just want to say, for me, it's an honor to be here. Zig Ziglar, for me, has been perhaps a model, and I would say arguably the finest communicator of the 20th century. So in order to be here and to be able to be a part of the Ziglar Speakers Institute is a tremendous honor. I come from a crazy family. I come from a dysfunctional family. My parents are great people. They're wonderful people, but I wasn't raised in the typical Beaver Cleaver home. My wife was. So we came together, and it's sort of like Guns N' Roses meets Beaver Cleaver. And that's the kind of marriage we have. We have a great family. But I wanted to also mention that my wife and I are missionaries, and that gives us the opportunity to speak in many different cultures, in many different contexts, in 2 different languages. And so that gives us a tremendous amount of breadth when it comes to exposure and taking a message, which we believe is a transformational message, to a people group that is desiring to hear that message. So as we begin, I just want to mention that I became a speaker because I fell in love with the concept of being a speaker. This was way before we were ever involved in ministry or anything like that. I remember working in a company called More Business Forms. And the day that my boss walked in, he said, "Jason, I've got good news for you. You've made Achievement Club." Now what that meant is that they took all the top salespeople and they took us to a retreat in Maui. So there we were in Maui, and we had, 4 or 5 days. We had a business session once a day for 1 hour, and the rest of the time was leisure. Well, we had this mandatory business day, and we were going to hear a motivational speaker. So I was 22 at the time. My wife was roughly the same age. I won't get into her age at this point. And all of a sudden, this guy walks on the stage, and he presents for 45 minutes. And he told a story about a guy who came into his hotel room and brought room service. He spent 10 minutes talking about all the details about how this guy miraculously lowered the platter and opened the curtains in such a way. He went into all the different details of this thing. And when he got done, when we went back to the mainland, I called my headquarters and I said, "Hey, that was a great speaker. I just want to know, how many days was he there?" "Oh, 2 days. We bought his airline tickets. And may I ask what his honorarium was?" "Oh yeah, his honorarium was $5,000. I said, "Whoa, you mean he got $5,000 airplane tickets, 2 nights in a hotel, for 45 minutes of work? And she said, yes. And I thought to myself, that's what I want to do with my life. Now, my life is not just about motivational speaking, as you know. I want to share with you the concepts, some secrets that will make every speaker, every communicator, a good one or a great one. So the very first thing we're going to talk about today is the need to have a point. One of the greatest mistakes that many communicators around the globe make is that they have too many points. Instead of having many points, you need to be thinking about one thing, and that is, what do I want my audience to do? What do I want them to think? What do I want them to buy? Or what do I want them to be loyal to when they walk out the door? You're going to see that on the screen. What do you want your audience to buy, to do, to think, or be loyal to when they walk out the door? And as you focus in on that concept, you'll have a much better ability at reaching the people group that you desire to reach. Like I said, politicians, preachers, communicators, keynote speakers have too many points. They're trying to juggle too many things at the same time. And as a result, they're not effective at any given one. So just keep in mind, what is my audience? What is the thing that I want them to buy, to do, to think, or be loyal to when they walk out the door? Now we're going to talk about the first secret. The very first secret that great communicators bring to the table is something that I like to call special interests. A special interest is focusing on that area, that special interest, and that helps you to maintain the attentiveness of your audience. So know your audience and their interests and lead them toward the discoveries that will further their particular quest in those areas. Just recently I was speaking to a city in California. All the leadership was there, the city manager was there, but I noticed that the age group was between 25 and let's say 45. I noticed that there was a number of females in the crowd, and so I asked the question, how many of you are parents? And literally every hand went up. When I saw that, I knew that there was a special interest in that crowd, and that was, how do I overcome the guilt that I feel for working full-time and at the same time trying to balance a motherly or a parental life? I'm sure that in that case there were some single mothers. So I spent a considerable amount of time dealing with how do you overcome guilt, how do you overcome the feeling like you're leaving your family behind just simply to move your career forward. And you know, they gave me wonderful remarks and wonderful compliments because they felt that I addressed the issues that they were facing. So focus in on those special interests. The second secret is that in every presentation, you want to have relatable characters. And by that, I mean that you want to have characters that people can relate to. You're going to see on the screen a specific definition of that, which implies that every dynamic presentation contains characters that are relatable, whether they are the characters in the stories or illustrations we use, or the tone and demeanor which we use during our delivery. An audience connects with people they can relate to. And that is very true in every area. Now, when you think about the characters that you really connect with in a story, you think of Cinderella, you think of the underdog, you think of the guy who's the down and outer. It's when we come in as speakers and presenters and we're the hero, we're the guy that saved the day, we've got it all under control. That's when the audience disconnects from us. They relate to people that they can connect with. And usually they're always going to connect with the underdog or people who are overcoming insurmountable odds. That brings us to the third secret. The third secret is being able to capture emotion in our presentation. It is very crucial that as a communicator that we don't just communicate facts, that we communicate feelings as well. And you're going to see that definition on the screen. Emotion is one of the most powerful forms of connecting with an audience, although it can be very risky. Most people want to laugh and feel something as a result of their experience in an event. Just recently, I flew to Buenos Aires. I was there for a week. And during my time that I walked up onto the stage, I thought, man, I need to say something that's going to connect with this audience and somehow break the ice. And then I remembered the flight down. I was sitting next to a gentleman who, for some reason or another, felt that he needed to text the whole way. And when he texted, he used his elbows. So I wasn't really particularly fond about the occasional elbow jab, and I was pinned against the window, and of course the exit door was protruding out, so I had no place to put my feet. Finally, when he falls asleep with his head cocked to the side right next to my ear, and sure enough, and he starts to snore really loud. Now that was the longest flight of my life. I think I watched the same movie 3 times in a row. Now when I said that to the audience, they all laughed. They thought it was very funny. And why is that? That's because emotion, humor, whether it's sadness or anything else, connects with an audience. The 4th secret is something that I like to call conflict resolution. And you're going to see a definition of that conflict resolution on your screen. Every great speech resolves a conflict, whether it's a movie, a novel, or some kind of commercial, sermon, sales call, medical operation, or a couple staying married for 50 years. People stay connected to the narrative until they find out how the conflict is resolved. Now, I have a daily live radio program. It's on a Spanish network. It's called Radio Nueva Vida. And I've learned over the years that you never allow your guest to finish their story before you go to the commercial break. That is the sin of sins, especially in television and radio. You have to leave the audience hanging over a barrel so that they have a reason to continue as they are tuning into your program, whether it's radio or television. And the reason why I say that is because people are driving, people are moving, people are disconnecting, they may be grabbing their cell phones. But once you introduce an element where a conflict has to be resolved, they're going to stick around until they find out how that conflict is resolved. The next area, or the 4th secret, is something that we like to call suspense. Suspense is very important. It's something that captures an audience, regardless if it's a live audience or regardless of whatever it is that you're facing. This is the definition that I have. Every great speech has an element of suspense built into its content or delivery. Building your stories, teasing your points, and revealing the golden nugget at the right time will keep your audience engaged. Now, I like to use this particular example because it's something that has been seen by everyone. Titanic is a movie that we have all seen. Some of it has seen it perhaps 10 times. And I ask any audience, how many of you have ever seen Titanic? And every hand goes up. And usually I say, well, when was the last time you've seen Titanic? And some people say it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or something like that. But it's very interesting. It's a historical fact that that boat goes down. We know it's going to go down. It's a historical fact that the boat sank. Yet we are still going to sit through 3 hours and watch it sink again because there might be the off chance that this time it might not sink. And we are really tuned in to Jack and Rose, even though we know that they didn't exist. Although there's a part of us that really believes that that necklace is still at the bottom of the Atlantic, and we should go down there and try to find it because, after all, that would make the story even more real. But the issue that I want to focus in on is that we are people that are captured by this element of suspense. We have to figure out how the thing is going to turn out, and we're going to stay engaged until we do. So when you do your presentation, when you do your keynotes, it's imperative that you build all of these secrets into your presentation. And when you do, your audience will not help but be engaged and connected to every word that you're saying. Now, when I talk about the audience, I want to share this last secret, which is the 6th secret. But before we get there, I want to describe to you what the average audience looks like. 20 to 22% of every audience is made up of this first kind of individual, which is what I call group 1. This is the group that says, I want you to get to the point. It's not that these people don't have a whole lot of patience, but I would sort of label them like a Donald Trump or a Yosemite Sam. It's very interesting. Recently, I was speaking to a group and I mentioned that, and I said, this particular group wants you to get to the point, and they would prefer that this webinar would last about 2 minutes. Immediately while I was speaking to this group, this guy in the front row asked this question, excuse me, when is this going to be over? I said, well, you would be in group 1. Thank you very much. The second group is a group that I like to call Show Me Some Passion. These are people sort of like Jay Leno and SpongeBob. And Recently, actually it was in the same seminar, I said to the group, I said, you know, I think it would be great if you could sort of take a vote. How many of you know who SpongeBob SquarePants is? Nobody raised their hand except for a girl who was probably younger than 25. Everyone over than 25 didn't know who SpongeBob was. And yet, I asked the question, how many of you know who Yosemite Sam is? And everybody raised their hand except for the 25-year-old girl. So all that to say is absolutely important that you understand the dynamics of your audience. The third group is a group that I would like to call, let me know that you care. This group is comprised of people sort of like Mr. Rogers and Charlie Brown. These are the people that need to know that you really care. And finally, the fourth group is a group that is sort of like Bill Gates and Mr. Spock. These are the people that say, hey, I need you to stick to the facts. Now, when you consider that every audience is made up of 20 to 25% of any given group that I just mentioned, there is only one way to hit these people, and that is through this last secret. Every great speech has a balance between facts, stories, illustrations, stimulating language, and transformational statements. It is absolutely imperative that when you come to the table, that you can speak in a language that is with story, transformational statements, that can have facts, illustrations, and somehow hit every one of these four groups all at the same time. When you do that, you now have a presentation that is going to hit them right between the eyes. Now, why is this so important? Well, first of all, like Zig Ziglar said so many times, what is it that we want in life? We all want to be happy, healthy, and reasonably prosperous. We all want to have healthy family relationships, decent friendships, hope for the future, peace of mind. And when you combine all those things, every human being in every culture wants to have those kinds of things. So when you present and when you focus on that sixth final secret, when you reach that crowd, you want to speak to them in the language and remembering the things that every human being wants. Recently, I was in Springfield, Missouri. I had to return back to California. I was going to head to Cuba. In my bag, in my suitcase, I had some very, very important supplies for my friends in Cuba. I also had my speaking attire in the bag. So I flew from Springfield, Missouri. I'm going to fly home to get my bag. When I lived in LA, I got to the airport at noon. I checked my bag. I flew through Dallas, had a 2-hour layover, continued on to Miami. I landed in Miami at 12:45 in the morning. The next day, I'm supposed to be at the same airport at 5 a.m. because that's when the charter flight leaves from Miami to Havana. So I'm standing by the conveyor belt. I'm waiting for my bag. No bag. So I wait about 5 minutes and I think to myself, I really need this bag because if I don't have this bag, I don't have my speaking attire, nor do I have the important supplies that I need to take to my Cuban colleagues who are living in Havana. So I finally walk up to the bag specialist and I said, I need to know where my bag is. And he looks at me and he says, I don't know where your bag is. I said, granted, I had flown all day. I got up at 6 a.m. I was exhausted. So I tried to be humorous about this. So I looked at him and I said, I'm sorry. By chance, did I get into a time capsule and come back in time and I landed in 1814? Is this 1814? He said, no, he laughed. He said, no, this is 24. I said, that's impossible. It can't be 2014 because if it's 2014, we have something called computers that tell us where our bags are. I said, I need to know. It's urgent. I need to know where my bag is. He said, I don't know where your bag is. I said, okay. He said, I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter where you're going. Tomorrow, I will ensure that the bag is going to whatever country you're going to. I said, that's the problem. I'm going to a country that this airline cannot service. He said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Cuba. He said, not a problem. We can send bags to Cuba. At that, the supervisor walks up and she says, you know, no one who ever is deceitful ever makes it to the top of this organization. That was a transformational statement. There is some suspense built into this story. You want to know what happened to that bag? I will tell you in just a moment. We are in the middle of an illustration. We're also in the middle of a story. And now I know I have your attention. And why is that? because all the elements that we just talked about are being summed up in this final illustration. She looked at him and used that transformational statement. No one who is ever deceitful can ever make it to the top of this organization. She apologized to me. I went on to Cuba without the bag. The bag was offloaded in Dallas, and following Wednesday, it was sent back to my house. So I had to speak in Cuba in tennis shoes. First time I've ever done that. Now, why did I use that story? Because it exemplifies and illustrates all the different components coming together. And I know that if it's told right, and if it is used properly, it makes a connection with the audience. I want to highly encourage you as a speaker. We've talked about a lot of different things today that are transformational. My desire is that you not be a good speaker, that you would be a great speaker. And you can do that by implementing these 6 secrets that we talked about. Don't forget that very first point that I made. Have one point. The one thing you want your audience to do, buy, think, or be loyal to when they walk out the door. I believe beyond the shadow of a doubt, your best days are ahead. I look forward to seeing you at the Ziglar Speakers Institute, where you will make a huge quantum leap to the next level. I'm going to invite Tom to come back, and we're going to field some questions.
All right.
And I'm really excited about all that's going to be orchestrated in the coming days and months.
Jason, that was fantastic. For those of you on right now, when you look at your screen, in the top right-hand corner is a question box. So you can enter questions in there to ask Jason. So I want you to think about this. Imagine that you're Jason Frenn and you've given over 5,000 keynote addresses in your career. You can imagine that he's handled every travel circumstance, every weird stage, every mic that's ever gone out, every presentation that gets changed at the very last minute because they said, hey, you've got an hour. And when you get there, they say, no, you've got 2 hours, or no, you've got 15 minutes.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
I mean, these are the curveballs that you get. And here's an even better one. You're known as a speaker, and you're in an event, and the speaker who's scheduled to come doesn't show up. So the host comes to you because they know you're a speaker, and they say, hey, you got 20 minutes that can keep our crowd engaged? So what do you do when that happens? These are the kind of questions that I think you should ask Jason. We're going to get to the questions in just a minute, but I want to share with you something that's very, very exciting, and that is our Ziglar Speakers Institute. It's going to be hosted by and presented by Jason right here. Jason, and all of his experience, he's put together a fabulous 3-day program where you're going to discover the secrets to building a prestigious career as a dynamic speaker. What do I mean by this? This is the next step beyond what it means to be a trainer. Trainers are effective in leading a group through a process. Speakers don't have the same amount of time. Usually a keynote is between 30 minutes and 2 hours. What is the most common length of time for a keynote in your experience?
Usually it's about 45 minutes.
45 minutes.
40 to 45 minutes.
So you've got to nail a main point. You've got to inspire the audience to take action. You've got to take them on a journey, and then you got to get out of there. That takes a real talent. So we're going to be discussing not only how you deliver that program, but how you build that program. We're going to go into detail on that on the 3 days. 3 fantastic days on how to get ready to learn how to read any audience. We talked about that in the presentation today. Every audience is different. I recently had an engagement where I did a nursing conference, and it was so funny because all the nurses were just like me. They were all S's. They were all very steady personalities, which means if you're the speaker, it's frustrating because all they do is smile and nod. They smile and nod.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's saying, I don't get it. Nobody's saying, I love that. They're all just smiling. It's so you got to learn how to read the audience. You got to acquire the skills to become a world-class keynote speaker, and that's what you're going to learn. What are the elements you need to be considered world-class? My speaking coach said this to me. He said, Tom, if anybody says just go out and be yourself, they're making a huge mistake by telling you that. Right? You've got to go out and be the best version of yourself. Now, we talked about this morning. We're not gonna change people's style. What are we going to do in the class?
No, we want to take their style. We want to enhance their style. We're not trying to change them to be something that they're not. We want them to become the best that they can be. We're not interested in trying to have them adapt my style or your style. What we want is we want them to be the best that they can be in the style that they have been created to be. And we know that that's the most effective way to communicate. The most effective communicators are the ones that are genuine and the ones that are sincere. And if we can help you be that way, you will be extremely effective as a communicator.
Yeah. And here's the thing: there's there's kind of a speaker's guidebook or a speaker's. These are the things that most effective speakers do most of the time. And if you evaluate my dad, Zig Ziglar, he broke every single one of those rules. Yeah. And so we want you to know that when you come to us, it's the idea is that you become the best version of yourself possible. Yeah. Then we're going to teach you how to keep the most difficult audience engaged, because there's nothing more frustrating. I don't know if you've ever done this. I've had this experience where you finish off the third day on a 3-day long conference, and they've all been up 14 hours a day in meetings, and then late into the night partying.
Yeah.
Yep.
Especially the last night.
Yeah. And then you get on stage to close off, and your audience is, man, they're worried about their flight. Is the guy going to finish on time?
That's right.
How do you keep? What's a tip that you would say to keep somebody engaged?
The first thing that happens to me more often than you'd think. What I do a lot of times is I walk up to the sound guy and I say, I need to know where my limits are on the stage. I ask the same about the camera guy, and sometimes I will begin my presentation in the middle of the audience. And I will tell the follow spots, I'm going to be there at a certain time. That breaks it up. It sort of mixes things up so that they don't become accustomed. Where is this guy? I guess they have to follow this. Oh, he's over there. And that way, it sort of breaks the ice, keeps people on the edge of their seats. And people always get a little nervous. They don't know why, but they get nervous when the speaker walks right in front of them. So those are some of the things that I do when I'm dealing with audiences of more than 500 that are extremely burned out, or they've been up all night partying. Or, they're, a lot of times I speak open air in Central America where there is no seating, there are no benches, and you have to move, you have to change things up in order to keep the crowd connected with you.
It's amazing what you deal with that you can't ever prepare for, and there are principles that you can employ that will allow you, no matter what the circumstance is. I remember one of the very first talks I ever gave was in an outdoor venue. It was to a political event, and we had a hailstorm come through. And we all ran into this barn, and the barn had a tin roof. Oh. So imagine giving a speech with the hail hitting a tin roof with no microphone.
No, I can't imagine.
So that was fun.
It's pretty bad.
We're going to teach you the expertise to consistently produce a first-rate speech. Just like you learned in the beginning of this webcast, there are elements that go into every speech.
That's right.
How much more confidence will you have when you walk out on stage knowing that you have every element it takes to make it a first-rate speech, one that's going to hit home? During the course, during the 3 days, we're going to have 4 of us there presenting and teaching and sharing our experience. There's going to be Jason, Brian Flanagan, who's been with us over 30 years. He's delivered literally thousands of presentations for Ziglar. I'll be there. My sister Julie will be there. Jason, as you can see here on this screen, I mean, he's every circumstance you can imagine. What's the biggest audience you've spoken to?
Probably close to 20,000.
20,000 people. That is a huge audience. And there's nothing more exciting and nothing more intimidating. I mean, does your blood pressure go up before you go out?
A little bit, not as much as it used to.
Yeah.
But it definitely does. It definitely does. And one of the reasons is because one feels the responsibility. You have a responsibility when you're addressing people. And I've learned that it's very important, that it's just as important to speak with the same amount of conviction and passion to 12 people as it is to 20,000 people. And as a speaker, you should, and you owe that to them. Just because there's 12 people doesn't mean that they deserve any less of your energy. So that's why the things that we're going to be talking about is great. They're going to be very versatile, whether you speak to 20, 30, 40 people, or if you speak to 20, 25,000 people. This course is going to be fantastic. It's going to help you get to that next level and keep your audience engaged.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I reminded about Dad is he always felt like there was one person in that audience that if he just delivered the best that he could, that it could be the first step to changing their life.
That's right.
And so in that regard, it doesn't matter how big the room is. Of course, Brian, here he is in Russia doing a presentation there, a corporate training. Thousands of speaking engagements and training events throughout. He's going to be sharing his wisdom through the years of preparing and traveling. Then, of course, I get to go out and speak now all over the world. It's such a blessing. I get I walk in my Father's footsteps. So everywhere I go, it's like I'm speaking to family. I'm talking to family. But you know what? That's a mindset. You can actually go out and accomplish the same thing. If you envision that you have friends and relatives and family in the audience, right, they're going to receive you in that same way. And of course, my sister Julie is going to be there. Julie speaks and travels all over the world. She did over 100 presentations with my father. Wow. Her average audience size was over 15,000 people.
Wow.
She did a interview format. Julie's specialty is nonprofits. I do corporations. Brian does corporations. You do the whole gamut.
I do everything.
You do everything. Yeah. So we cover all the bases. We've spoken for government agencies, nonprofits, corporations. You know, you name it, we have been there. Julie also has edited over 30 of Dad's books. So as a speaker, one of the things that we know for sure is that while we can have an amazing keynote presentation that moves people into action, we need to leave something behind for them to take action with.
That's right.
And so if you're looking to expand your platform and your offerings, then Julie's the one that you're going to want to talk to on the side, because she knows what it takes to write the books, to produce the materials, to make it happen. And then, of course, we have Lori Majors. Now, Lori is what we call our secret weapon. Lori will be here during this. She's going to be on a Q&A panel. She'll be somebody you can talk to at the breaks. But she was Dad's personal assistant for 35 years. She's actually signed over 2,000 contracts for speaking, just for Dad alone, not to mention the other people in our organization. So any type of question that you have, you know, how should I book this, and how much time should I allow for travel, and what are the things that are acceptable for me to ask for in an agreement? What are the things that have come up that are kind of oddball that you think I should know, right? Because,
as well as, how did your dad prepare for a speech?
Yeah.
What did he go through in the moments leading up to? She is an encyclopedia of information.
Yeah, I mean, just asking her the question, okay, how did Mr. Z, that's what she called him, how did he prepare his notes before he went out and spoke? Because he would do that, and he would send them to Lori. Lori would type them up, make them big so that he could read them and go through that process, right?
That's right.
Right? And then Dad, I mean, it was a whole process. So you're going to understand and you're going to learn that. Plus, you're going to gain an insider's view. We were just talking about this. How did he prepare a talk? What did he do in preparation for it? So just tell me, when you go, I know what Dad did, but when you were getting ready to go speak, what do you do the day before and the day of the presentation?
Well, I've already asked myself the questions. For example, what is this audience? What do they want? What are their special interests? What do they need? What do they want to buy, or what do they want to feel? What do they need for their soul? Those are the kinds of questions I ask myself leading up to. I try to find out that information. I've already talked to the coordinator to glean as much information as I can. However, the things that I'm doing beforehand, I am running, I'm trying to eat right, I want to get enough sleep, I don't want to overdose on my caffeine, but I also want to walk the venue. I want to get to the venue ahead of time. I'd prefer to do that when no one is there. I want to sit in the front row, and I want to sit at the last possible row or the highest seat in the stadium, and I want to get a feel of the distance so I can understand how I should be projecting and what are the elements of this stadium or this arena or this auditorium that I have to conquer, because as a speaker we have to conquer, in essence, every venue in which we find ourselves. I also want to find out certain logistical things, for example, like, will the audience be lit? There's nothing that throws off a speaker quicker than walking into an auditorium, having no lights on the audience, and all you can see is maybe the shoes of the very front row in the auditorium. That, especially if you're used to eye contact, that can really throw you off your game. So those are the kinds of things that I want to find out ahead of time, especially when I come to the event that day. I want to see what the venue is like. I want to see it, especially if I can see it empty. That really helps.
I tell you, my last engagement, which was in Papua New Guinea last week, all kinds of things came up. I walked out there the day before, we're reviewing the room, and it was a low-ceilinged room and very deep. So we had 300 people in a room that was kind of long and narrow, low ceiling, and it had beams in it.
Yeah.
And so I made a conscious decision. I've got to move back and forth a lot. And I had them change the stage because they had the stage right in the center, which limits your ability. So I made it long and skinny so I could go back and forth. And then they gave me a handheld mic. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got 8 hours in front of this room doing this. I don't know if you've ever done that. So we were able to get a lapel mic. These are all things that if you check it out the day before, you've got time to fix it.
Sure.
So,
and by the way, I prefer the handheld over 8 hours. I'd rather have than the lapel.
You would?
Any day of the week. Yeah.
Why is that?
Because they're less demon possessed. The lapel mics are highly demon possessed. The handhelds are not.
Well, I had the handheld as a backup.
Well,
Okay. So we're going to give you secrets on how to make your presentation unforgettable. When you get an email 2 weeks later, when you understand that what you're talking about needs to be remembered, there are key things that you can put into your presentation to make it unforgettable. We're going to help you enlarge your platform. How do you get referrals? How do you get testimonials from the one event that you went to that's going to help you move on and go to the next one? So here are the details, and then we'll get in the Q&A. It's going to be right here in Plano, Dallas, Texas is what we say. You land at DFW Airport. It's about a 30-minute drive to our offices. It's going to be Monday through Wednesday, October 19th through the 21st. You're going to want to come. It's going to be a fantastic time. You're surrounded by our team right here in our headquarters. And then here's the investment. The investment for this program is $5,000. However, we are having an introductory offer, which I'm going to get to, an early bird special, but this is what I wanted to point out. Just by word of mouth, we have already filled 10 of the 25 seats. So if you're interested in this, you're going to want to take action today. So what is the early bird special? It's 50% off, $24.97. So if you are wanting to come to the very first ever Speaker Institute class that we're having here at Ziglar, then you're going to want to take action immediately. Call us right now at 800-527-0306. Make sure that you reserve your spot, because we know that you're going to benefit from this, that you're going to want to come, you're going to take your speaking to the next level. Why not capitalize on over 40 years of experience from, and between you and Brian and Julie and myself, we've probably got collectively at least 75, maybe even 100 years of front of the room experience. And we have Zig Ziglar's legacy there. You've got Lori Majors, 35 years of representing all in the room that'll give you the keys you need to go to the next level. Make sure you call right away. Jason, let's get to those questions that we've had. And I'm going to make it easy. I'm going to stand here and feed them over to you. Okay.
All right.
How do you balance being fun and engaging with sounding professional and smart?
That's a really good question. That's an excellent question. I think you have to be very intentional, especially when you come up with your content. I'm intentional about humor, and I'm also intentional about those transformational statements. Transformational statements are like nuggets of philosophy. For example, you can have anything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what you want, get what they want. Excuse me. Having said that, that of course comes from Zig Ziglar. That is a philosophical statement that is very profound, and yet you mix that with a story that has humor and you're intentional, then I think you've got a very good presentation. It's when people go off, they go down these rabbit trails, they're not necessarily rehearsed, or they are sort of ADD in their presentation, they have lots of different points. That's when there's no intentionality, that's when a presentation comes off the tracks. And quite frankly, people say, yeah, it was interesting, yeah, it was engaging, yeah, it was entertaining, but I wasn't really transformed. The goal of every presentation is to lead people toward a transformational decision, whether it's what they buy, what they think, what they do, or the cause that they're loyal to.
All right, next question here. What do you think is the most important thing to do as a person who is just starting out in business of consulting and teaching?
I think the first element, and this is something that I've written about, something that I speak about, something that I preach about, and that is we must be people of integrity. People will eventually size us up. It's interesting, I think that Hispanics have the ability to size us up much quicker than us Americans. They have the ability to see the heart, the genuineness of the heart. So I think being a person of integrity is absolutely crucial. That is the very first element of foundation. Secondly, I would say it's very important that once you've established that integrity and morality in terms of who you are as a presenter, then I think it's important that you be well-read and be well-informed. But I wouldn't shy away from other things that I think can be very helpful, such as an acting class. I've actually take that back. I have taken one acting class, but I think that helps in terms of being able to display and project on stage, because actors, especially ones on Broadway, they have to learn how to project. Those are all skills that we don't necessarily teach in the average university or average seminary. So I think that those kinds of things can be very, very helpful.
Yep, I love the quote that we have here that we'll show you. because it sums up that answer. It just says this: you are the only person on earth who can use your ability. It's an awesome responsibility.
That's right.
Right? So to me, what he just said, you got to maximize your own ability.
That's right.
And it starts with integrity. Okay, next question here. How can I apply these 6 secrets in a training style presentation rather than a keynote?
Well, I don't think that there's going to be much of a difference between how you would do this in a training environment as opposed to a keynote. A keynote basically is a presentation that goes for 40 to 45 minutes, might go for 20 minutes without an interruption. You might ask the audience a rhetorical question, but for the most part, there's not going to be a whole lot of audience participation. A training session is a lot less formal, and you'll have a lot more interaction. They have what we call turn and learns. A turn and learn is when you give the audience an assignment. They turn and they learn from each other, or they do something in front of them, and the speaker is not speaking the whole time. But the concepts of building in these 6 areas, whether it's having suspense, relatable characters, stories, illustration, all those things are absolutely necessary to keep any audience engaged, whether it is a training session or whether it's a keynote speech.
All right. Next question. Are keynotes only inspirational? Can they be informative about tough topics as well?
Absolutely, they can be. As a matter of fact, I think that every keynote should be inspirational and it should be informative. Inspirational messages, I think, are very, they're heavy with story and illustrations, because we hear an illustration or a story and we connect with that character, and we say, well, if he or she can do that, then I can do it too. But that's why we mentioned earlier that it's important to have the facts and have the elements of information in there, so that people who are part of that just show me the facts or just stick to the facts, that person can walk out of there saying, well, you know what, I learned something new today, as well as, you know, I feel inspired to do something today. So I think that it's important to sprinkle the presentation with both. You do that, you keep all 4 of those groups connected, regardless, again, if it's a training seminar or a keynote speech.
Okay, I want to hear your answer on this one, because we've all dealt with this.
Okay.
How do you handle it when someone is adamantly against the discussion and change? For example, in a group setting, they're constantly interrupting and they're giving negative remarks.
Okay, again, we're drawing the distinction between a keynote speech, which has hardly any audience participation, and a training session. So I will address this as a training session, and that is not necessarily the Ziglar Speakers Institute, but as a training session, a lot of times what I do is I very politely say, well, you know, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on this, or what we need to do is we're going to let that sort of lie for a while. I've had hecklers. I've had people that were, and sometimes you just need to push through it. You always smile. You never engage with them. I'll give you an example. I was speaking, one of my first assignments as a missionary, I was speaking at a retirement home. It was an old folks home. Actually, it wasn't hospice care, but it was one of those scenarios where you had nothing but wheelchairs. It was actually in the hospital. And I think that half the people in the room had dementia. Half of them, at least. And this lady in the last row, the whole time, she did nothing but shake her head. Oh, I can't blush. Finally, she just says, oh, phooey dooey on Yui. And I have never in my entire life ever been heckled or been said or been told phooey dooey on Yui since that time. But the only thing that I could do besides sort of laugh was smile and say, you know, I really appreciate you sharing that, and then continue on with my presentation. Sometimes these are things that you just have to push through. And of course, unless you're dealing with a hostile crowd, which we've all dealt with, a lot of times just simply acknowledging them and saying, okay, but yeah, I appreciate that, but we're going to move on because we have to move on. Again, I'm speaking in the environment of a training session, not a keynote presentation. A lot of times if you address that, acknowledge it, and move on, it'll eventually go the way of the dodo bird.
Yes. Let's see, how do you create emotion or suspense with an audience when you're discussing a subject that is not very exciting?
I was speaking at the one example that I gave earlier about the parents in the crowd. I was speaking and I said, you know, you need to introduce a story. You need to introduce suspense. You need to introduce conflict. She says, well, what happens? She says, I speak to an audience for perhaps 30 minutes and I can't say a story. I said, why can't you say a story? She goes, well, it's not allowed that I said, what do you mean it's not allowed? How can you not be allowed to tell a story? She says, no, my job is to stand up and read the financial statement for the city. I thought, wow, you're absolutely right. Sometimes, in some circumstances, your hands are tied and you can't. But if you are allowed to, in her case, she was not allowed to. It was stand up, read the financials. But even then, she said, you know what? If I can script it out in the form of a story, if I can tell the financials in the form of a story and call it the perfect storm or something like that, it will engage the audience. In fact, she reported back to me that that's in fact exactly what happened. So what I want to say is that there is a way to package or present your presentation in such a way that creates suspense, that creates conflict, that creates a mystery and paints it in terms of a story. Even financial statements you can do that with. And I think if you think in those terms, you'll be very effective.
Yeah, I remember a formula that works well, and it's a real simple one, and it is simply the idea that the formula goes like this: you present a problem, right? Then the consequences of that problem, and then the solution.
Right.
So if you've got a dull, boring subject like the finances of a city, the problem in that case could be, 42 cities are in danger of going bankrupt, right?
That's right.
The consequences are people are going to lose their water, their electricity, businesses are going to flee the environment, housing values are going to go down, right?
That's right.
All of those things are real. And then you could give your report, and at the end, the suspense comes back in. Because we've made these decisions, our community is in good shape.
Yeah.
Right?
That's exactly right. And when she painted in the terms of a perfect storm, that's what you just said is a perfect example of that.
Okay. So the formula again is problem, consequences, solution. And you as the presenter, you either are the solution or you're bringing the solution.
That's right.
All right. Let's see. Here's one personal. It's so hard for me to talk slow and not hesitate and stutter. Any suggestions?
Yeah, that's a really great
How about
question.
a bigger one, like a stage fright issue?
Yeah. I always tell people that we coach that you're not speaking to 5,000 people. Every day I'm on the air. We have probably 40 radio stations across the United States in Spanish. And I tell every guest, because they inevitably get really nervous, their hands start to shake. I say, listen, you're not talking to 1.5 million people. You're talking to one person, just one person. And as a matter of fact, your dad used to say that. I don't talk to 20,000 people. I talk to one person. I talk to that person for 2 seconds, and I talk to that person for 2 seconds, I talk to that person for 2 seconds. And so you want to break it down. You're not talking to thousands, you're not talking to large groups, you're talking to one individual. I think that is where the internal dialogue, which is one of the segments that we cover in the Speakers Institute, how does a speaker speak to himself or to herself? That is one of the most important conversations that a speaker will have, especially in the presentation. You control that conversation, and pretty soon what you say on the exterior, when you say on the outside, is going to have a significant impact, and it's going to be much more effective. So when you are thinking about how do I overcome my stutterness if I speak slowly or stage fright, one has to tap into that internal dialogue and begin to change the paradigm, change the tape that's up here, and as you do, you're going to be much more effective. One of the things that I do, like I said, is I don't talk to 20,000, I talk to one person. The other thing I think to myself is, and I tell myself this before I get on stage, I've done my research. I have a conviction to say something that's going to be very profound and very important for them to hear. And if I've done my research, and if I have something that's going to be life-changing to them, it is my duty to say that to them in the best way that I can. This is something that they want me to say it. They need me to say it. And if that's what's going on inside your head when you present, then you're going to say things with conviction. And now, let me just emphasize, it doesn't matter if you stutter. It doesn't matter if you have a nervous twitch. What matters is the conviction in your heart, because people look past the twitches and they look past the stuttering because they can see the heart in a presenter. So be someone of conviction and you'll impact millions of people.
Yep. Here's a tip that I would add on to that, and that is Michael and Margaret, there are two sales professionals here, and they have booked between them literally thousands of speaker days and training days in the last 30 years combined of experience they have here at Ziglar. And so one of the things that we do, this is a best practice. And you remember, when you come to our Speakers Institute, Michael and Margaret will be here, and you'll be able to ask them these type of questions. But one of the things that they do is they will coordinate with the host, whoever's bringing us out to speak, and they will ask, who are the names of 3 top influencers who are going to be at that engagement. Yep. And so that's what you do too, right? You get on the phone before you go, and you ask these influencers. They could be a department leader, they could be a long tenured employee who has a lot of credibility in the group, and you ask them questions about what they're expecting. What kind of questions do you ask them?
First thing I ask any coordinator, it doesn't matter if it's in a church, whether it's a crusade, whether it's for public service, a government, doesn't matter. Any circumstance, I ask the coordinator, what would a home run look like? If I walk out the door, in your mind, what does a home run look like? And they'll say, that's a good question. And they begin to think about it. They begin to meditate for a moment, and they say, what we want this, because our people really need that. I said, okay, great. I need to talk to 6 other people in the organization that I can ask the same question to, somewhat at the grassroots level. After I've had 4 or 5 other conversations, sometimes it takes me maybe an hour or 2 of investigating, all of a sudden I've got a very good profile of who's sitting in the audience and what they need. Then I begin to develop a presentation that is going to meet that specific need, and as a result, my nerves begin to go down. Why? Because I have already done, and all the mystery is now weeded out of it. I've done a lot of the research, and now I know exactly what I need to focus it on.
Right, and what I pick up when I do the same thing is I learn that, I get buzzwords from the people I'm talking to. Like they have an agenda that year. They have marketing words that they're focused on. It could be grow by 100 stores this year. It could be, exceed our revenue by 10% or whatever. And they'll use buzzwords that are internal to their organization. If you can incorporate those into your presentation, they know that you cared enough to learn about them.
That's right.
And that bridges the gap.
That's right. That's something we covered under special interest as well.
2 more questions, and then we're going to close up. This is one I'm interested in the answer to. When given a keynote or a presentation, a lot of times you want to get feedback from the audience, like the answer to a question or their thoughts on something. What do you do when nobody's answering? Right? They're just quiet, but it's important to your talk because when they express their needs, you can adjust your answer and how you're going to present the rest of the time. What do you do to get that feedback going?
A lot of times I throw out the wrong answer. Sometimes, for example, if I'm speaking to a youth group, and I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of youth groups, I'll just simply say, well, how much does a pizza cost these days? Anybody know? No one says a word. What is it, like $2? $2? And I kind of look around, $2? And then pretty soon they're like, no, well, how much does it cost? And then I was like, $14. $14? $14? Are you kidding me? I'll say, well, how much does it cost to go to the movies? Was it $2? No. And then pretty soon, then they start barking out the answers. So all it takes is 1 or 2 times for that audience to kind of break out of that shell. I think it's really important that you find what works for you. In my case, when I bark out the wrong answer, the audience is very quick to correct me. That's what I do.
Right. I'll say things like, I'm sure that everybody in this organization is overpaid, right? Okay. Okay. What is the best way? This is the last question.
Okay.
What is the best way to market yourself?
That's another great question. That's another great question.
Let us know when you discover it, right?
I would say, right off the bat, I tell people, start a YouTube channel. Doesn't cost anything. Get a Twitter account. Doesn't cost anything. Instagram. Doesn't cost a thing. Facebook. Doesn't cost a thing. I think it's important that you, as an individual, if you're marketing yourself, that's why integrity is so important. You've got to be someone who's genuine, very sincere. And I think that those are the kinds of things that people think about. You're not responsible for the name that your parents gave you. Some of us were given names that were kind of so-so. But we are responsible for what people think when they hear our name called. So I think that that's your most important brand, is your name and your reputation. But in terms of building the marketing campaign around yourself, I'm going to start with the elements that are free first. And then as you add on, you can move from there. That's an excellent question. I mean, it's something that we could spend hours on. You are a tremendous marketer. I'll let you answer that as well.
Well, everything you just said is what we do, and at the end of the day, the reason you do the free social media is you are trying to build value and perceived value and brand in the marketplace. And your number one goal is to then bring people from social media in these free areas over to an offer that you give to them that has value for them that you offer for free.
That's right.
Right? And so let's just say that your expertise is plumbing, and you're out there on the speaker circuit talking to audiences interested in plumbing. So you might have a white paper that's free that says the 5 keys to picking the right plumber. Right?
Right.
It's so simple. And what you do is then you send out through your Facebook or Instagram or whatever, you just say, hey, get my free white paper. And when people link to you, they have to give you their email address in order to get this white paper. So for us, when we're talking to corporate decision makers who hire keynote speakers, we have a white paper that says the 7 keys
That's right.
to picking the right presenter.
That's right.
Right?
And they're great keys, by the way.
They're great.
They're great keys. They work for anybody.
Yeah, they are fantastic. And so your number one goal in marketing is to build your own list. So the reason you do the social media stuff is to then link people to your free offer, which they're happy to give you their email address for whatever you're giving them. Now you've got their email address, you can send them a newsletter, you can send them other things of value as you build that relationship.
That's right.
One last thing that is very effective is that and you have to do this with the host's permission, because every host is different. Some people don't like to do this. If you have something for free that has value that you can offer the audience at the end of the presentation, then you give it to your host, because you let the host keep the email inside of them, and you say, hey, if anybody responds to this, go ahead and send them this out. And what it is a survey. And one of the questions on the survey is, would you be willing to provide a testimonial? And if so, what would you say?
Yeah.
Or another question I love is, would you recommend this to somebody else? Yes. What would you tell them about coming? And then in that survey, the host will send it back to you, and you might get 10 or 12 people who write beautiful things about you, which you now, because they signed the survey, you now have permission to use in your own marketing.
Yeah.
It's a great way to add value, and people don't feel like you're pressuring them into a testimonial, and it takes very, very little time to do this.
That's right.
Well, we are wrapping up, so I want you to remember this. We only have about 15 spots available. If you want to make sure the spot's there for you, call our number 800-527-0306. If you do that, we're going to see you in October right here at Ziglar headquarters. So Jason, I'm going to give you the last 60 seconds, however long you want, to leave a memorable impression. So I've just set up a keynote speaker with 10 seconds of warning. Believe me, if you're a keynote speaker, this is going to happen to you more times than you like.
It will.
So here you go. Trial by fire.
All right. Last nugget that I want to leave with you is this. Ask yourself the following question before you do your presentation. If my audience could snap its fingers and make something miraculous happen in their life, what would they want to happen? What are the 3 greatest frustrations? If they could resolve any problem and sleep well at night, what would give them peace? If you can find and discover the answer to those questions and put together a presentation that meets that need, you will have a perfect A+ presentation that will lead people toward transformational decisions. I want to thank you so much. I wish you the very best. Join us in October. You're going to learn many, many new things. It's 3 days of intense but incredible opportunity where you will make that quantum leap to the next level. Thank you so much. God bless you. We'll look forward to seeing you in October.